Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of the Contractor Growth Show. Today I have Andy Bowyer at Middle Fork Luxury. Andy, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Fantastic. And Andy is a luxury home builder and restoration um, sort of builder in Chicago, in some of the historic neighborhoods. Taking a look at photos, just a lot of just absolutely gorgeous work. Andy, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the business, the history, and kind of what you guys are up to these days.
Sure. I have a educational and work background in both architecture and business. I went to University of Cincinnati to the Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning College, and then also have business degrees. And when I moved to Chicago, I worked in architectural firms and then spent about 15 years in the consulting industry. So I had always wanted to combine those. And in 2008, which a lot of people think was a very dark time in our industry, which it was, but it was for me a very good time to jump in and start with, very little start, small start, with doing spec homes and combining all of that. So my initial goal was to build a spec house and then build another one and build another one. And I had done a lot of analytics on the MLS and found that a couple of things. One, that in my target markets, property was still, there were still transactions, but primarily in the luxury market. So, and that kind of makes sense if you think about what was going on in the banking industry and everything at that point. These were typically all cash buyers who weren't really affected by the market other than, you know, long term prospects and what how that might impact their own portfolio. But they still wanted new houses, and the second thing that I had found is that a lot of the developers in Chicago had gone out of business because of the kind of the formulas that they were using in their businesses, and then the subprime issue kind of caused their house of cards to fall down. So there was demand and no supply. When I started, I wasn't targeting luxury home necessarily. I was just targeting building a home, and all that analysis made me realize that it was luxury was where I should be because of those were the buyers. And then the third thing that I found at that point was that the subprime had left or created an opportunity to be able to acquire pieces of property at a very discounted rate, so that once I improved those properties, it allowed me to sell to these new customers at a discounted rate, so I could pass the acquisition savings on to the clients, and so that benefited as well. In hindsight,
Interesting.
I wish I'd had a lot more money at that time to be able to buy a lot more properties and sit on it. But in Chicago, as you may or may not know, there's not like big tracts of land that are just sitting there vacant. So all of our work is either buying a piece of property that's undervalued and tearing down what's on it and rebuilding, or doing a massive renovation and restoration to a house that could be from 1890 or around 1900, and then doing an addition as well to that.
Okay, great. And I saw, on a description of some of your stuff, Middle Fork Luxury Development builds and renovates very special single-family homes in Chicago's most prestigious neighborhoods. Each Middle Fork property features innovation artistry of the city's most distinguished residential architects, landscapers, and craftsmen. So it seems like a kind of a one design element that has been key kind of in the incorporation of the business and what you guys have done is that, I mean, in 1871, there was a huge fire in Chicago. Miss O'Leary's cow kicked over a lantern, right? We all heard the story.
Right.
Burned just an absolutely huge part. Took a look at the map. I mean, it burned maybe all of downtown over by the lake. I mean, just a massive part of Chicago. And so after that, the building codes were very strict about the properties that were still intact, the properties that were saved, that any type of architectural, any type of construction that happens, I mean, it needs to leave that facade intact. And so you have to design around them. You have an architecture background. How has the fire and the resulting building codes kind of shaped, your work and the type of work that you guys do?
Well, I think it's it's a lot more um, it's a lot more challenging than if I was building in Ohio or uh, Indiana, where those kind of things didn't exist, right?
Uh-huh.
So, for instance, we did a gut rehab in addition to what's known as a workman's cottage, which survived the fire. So it was from like 1865 ish, I guess. And one of the things that happened is the historical society went through and landmarked just huge swaths of property, of land areas that did survive, to try to keep the historical, to keep the history basically alive and ongoing. So this house, we were required, so that workman's cottage was a style of home that was prevalent during that time period, and it was a masonry facade. It was a frame structure with masonry veneer, and we were required to keep the front facade. And they had also determined that 27 feet on each side going back were original. And
Mm.
then over the years, there had been a number of additions and renovations to the property. From that 27-foot point further back, the Historical Society certified that that was all newer stuff, so that could be torn down. But the front facade and the first 27 feet had to remain. So
Mm.
as we scraped out everything inside of that U shape, basically, we had to ensure the stability of that remaining masonry and brace it. And then we basically inserted a new house into that. We shoehorned it in. We dug the
Mm.
basement. We, then built within that, and then extended, the house back to a length of about 85 feet, I think. So there was all the integration between that 27-foot point and the new stuff and the waterproofing and the insulate and all that, and making sure that the floor levels all aligned, that it was all seamless. The good thing, actually, on this project was that all of the interiors had been renovated over the years, and so we weren't required to keep anything. But if it's a structure that the historical society believes is the interior is still intact from that time period, you can't do anything to that on the inside either without their review and
Wow.
approval.
Okay.
But they did things like, and this is just relatively recent. We wanted, we obviously had to replace all the windows on the house. So we worked with a historical consultant who would uh, research and find evidence of what was either at that property through photographs, either what was at that property when it was built, or what was typical of those types of workmen's cottages at that time period. So, for instance, this one was a 2/1 pane window. And so we were ultimately allowed to replace the windows with clad. That's only a new thing. Like
Mm.
it, 5 years before we did the project, we still would have had to have done it with wood, but it had to
Mm.
be a 2/1. And we had to present it to the board, and they had to approve it. There was a concrete stoop at the front door, which was in horrible shape, pitted, uneven. But they deemed that that was original to the house, and we weren't allowed to do anything to that either. We had to keep it, even though it
Mm.
was impractical. There were railings that were only like 28 inches high on either side of that concrete stoop, so it doesn't meet code, but we weren't to touch those either. So there's a lot of things that don't really make sense, but that, in an effort to try to keep some of the history of Chicago, you have to work within those parameters.
I see. Amazing. And I saw that, in a comment that you made, you said, I've intentionally stayed small over the years, working on no more than 3 projects at any one time, which enables me to remain hands on with every project. Also, home building at the scale is typically a multi-year process, and being involved with the day-to-day process means I can form positive, long-standing relationships with our clients. So, these are serious, incredible projects. You guys should, listeners, you should take a look at Andy's Facebook page. The work that you guys do is stunning. These are like, looking up from the top of a staircase down 4 stories all the way down through the middle of it with this gorgeous wood staircase that wraps around. Just stunning, and high end, multi-million dollar, serious projects that take a long time. So a lot of folks that we talk, builders, they want to go out to out to the suburbs and buy 2 acres of land and build 30 houses on it, and there's not the building codes, there's not the historic society. Why does it work for you? You have an architecture background, and I think you're really interested in the craft of all of this, and you're a serious craftsman. But in your words, why does it work for you to deal with these historical society and the building codes and all of these like very rigorous regulations that you guys are in every day? Why does that business model work for you?
Well, obviously, because I like to be poor. That,
Awesome.
yeah, that was obviously a joke. But, those people who are able to go out and get the 2 acres and build 30 houses, it's a much more successful financially. I think it's a much more successful model. And I
Hmm.
also think that, another thing that a lot of builders and developers, I did development from 2008 to 2016, and then I started working exclusively with clients. So I started doing custom builds in 2016. But, um, a lot of developers will also do like the exact same trim package in all of their houses, or, other details are consistent between houses. And that also creates efficiencies, which lead to bigger margins, because their carpenters can go in and they know exactly what they're doing. They've done it before, they can put it together. Um, we've never done that.
Maybe you could tell me a little bit about the process. When somebody contacts you for working with them, this is going to be, it sounds like a multi-year project in many cases to design the project and to build it. Um, is that correct? Are you literally building houses sometimes for multiple years to get these projects finished?
Well, so we're talking about on average, we're on a typically lots in Chicago are 25 by 125. And, it may be a combination of lots. So, a client might have 2 or 3 of those lots put together. But, we typically say that, it is going to take about 9 months to get to a building permit. So to develop the drawings and get to a building
Okay.
permit where we can start to build. Now we might bifurcate that process so that we have like a building permit for the shell, and then interiors, is on a different track, so that, as we're starting to pour foundations and or excavate or even demo, we can put that on its own track so we can get the building down that's currently there. But so we will look at it in different ways to try to be able to get work started as soon as possible, and then permit different things as we go through. But it's about 9 months to get a full building permit at the earliest. And if you're dealing with, a historic building or one that's, if you're at, so we have a thing where, there are codes specific to buildings. So you can you can propose a design that's all by right. And those go faster than if you're asking for relief. So you have to have 20% of the width of the property committed to side yards so that firemen can get front to back when a cow kicks over another lantern. You can reduce those though, but you have to go in front of um, aldermen and often community groups, and then in front of the zoning board of appeals to be able to say, instead of having 5 feet total on the lot committed to side yards, I want to have 3 feet on one side and 1 foot on the other side, or whatever. There has to be precedent on the street to allow you to be able to argue that case. So that can all add to it. And then the construction can easily take 18 months, depending on the complexity of it. I mean, everything is arriving as you need it. There's no storage for steel or mason. I mean, all that product comes, the day or the day before we need it. And, if it's steel, we're working with closing streets to be able to bring in cranes to get stuff lifted up. If it's heavy equipment that's going on the roof, we're bringing in cranes to get it lifted up. And so the scheduling of all that stuff is really important and impactful to the schedule. But that's a big challenge, I think, for a lot of people. They think, oh, I want to build a house, but then when they realize that it can be 24 months from start to finish, typically that's the minimum it can be very discouraging to people. So that's why I always say, start as soon as you can. People who are like, well, we're going to have a bunch of kids and we're going to need it. Well, start it now. You don't have to necessarily even build it. You can keep the permit for a year and then you can re-extend it if you need to. So, there's really no harm in early preparation.
Okay, interesting. And how many folks do you have on the team right now? It probably fluctuates.
It does fluctuate. So, my ideal scenario is that we work as a design build firm, meaning that we get involved with the client at the beginning and then work with the architect and the client to develop the program and the design, and then evolve into sort of a project management role there, and then we evolve into a construction management general contractor role once construction starts. So right now I have one person, a pretty senior project manager that helps me out. I have in the past had laborers. I had an in-house architect at one point. I've had a specifications person. What seems to work the best right now is that it's just me and this project manager, and everything else is subcontracted.
Okay.
So if anybody's looking to be a laborer, would love to know that, because that's really probably the one piece that makes it difficult, because as everybody who listens to this probably feels the same pain, putting up protection, or the Friday broom sweep of the house. Those become very challenging if you don't have people that you can just have that as their regular schedule. You've got to figure out who's going to do that and how are they going to do it and how you get it as part of their contract. So that would be helpful to have. But right now it's just my project manager and I.
Okay. Interesting. So you're on site. I mean, are you on site every day at the projects and they're kind of managing everything, keeping it going?
Yeah, I mean, there are periods of time, like, as a matter of fact, that's why I'm in my car right now. I just left a project where they've been doing the floors for the last week and a half. So I was there at the beginning, and then I wasn't there for, 4 or 5 days, and now they're finished and the painters are starting. So I was there again. And, I don't, I will, on that particular project, will be there sporadically to respond to any paint questions, or but I wouldn't be there every day watching the painters. But at another project where we're doing trim carpentry right now and starting to install cabinetry, we'll be there. Either my project manager and I will be there every day to respond to questions and issues. We're also installing tile there, and so the tile setter has different questions about orientation and material and that sort of thing. So we're on site during those periods of time.
Gotcha. Okay. And then it looks like your philosophy is to not have, huge growth. I mean, you talked about that you only have a few projects going on at a time. You like to establish long-term relationships with, um, the different folks you work with, and also with homeowners themselves. I get that sense that the growth isn't necessarily a huge sort of component for you. Could you unpack that a little bit? I mean, could you tell us a little bit more about what your philosophy on that is? I mean, a lot of companies, they just want to grow at all costs. I can see that you've really kind of hit your sweet spot there, and you like where things are at right now. Um, why not grow, 30% a year, on into the future?
So, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say there's a part of me that wishes that, I had built Middle Fork into a 25 million a year or 50 million a year company. But I also know that, so I don't, are you familiar with NAHB Builder 20 clubs?
Within AHB, not the Builder 20 clubs, though.
Okay. So within the NAHB, there are these clubs called Builder 20. And that at a high level, they are clubs that are made up of similar builders in non-geographically competitive markets. So I'm
Okay.
in a Builder 20 club. I've been in it for like 7 or 8 years now. And there are builders in Oklahoma, there's a builder in Montana, so we're all over the country. So we're able to come together and actually talk about financial issues or concerns or marketing
Hmm.
successes or failures. So it's almost like an advisory board, because you're able to talk about what works and what doesn't work. And if you have an issue on a project that you don't know how to address, that you've never seen before, you've got this group of other people. So my group, they build at the higher end of their market. That doesn't mean, that in Oklahoma that it's going to be a $5 million house, and it would even vary between, a project in Oklahoma might be 800,000, and the same project in Fort Collins, Colorado might be 1.5 or 2 million, and then that project in Chicago could be 4 million. So it's the same project. It's
Uh-huh.
just right, but we're all at the top of our market as far as the size and the types of projects we're building, and we're all single family construction builders. So, I some of those are very big builders, and it seems to me that the bigger you get like that, the less the more administrative work you're doing, right? You're
Uh-huh.
managing all the people, you're managing the benefits, you're managing just, you know, all of the things I used to work with Deloitte. I mean, there were 3,000 people in the Chicago office of Deloitte. I mean, it's a lot.
Well,
There's just a lot that has to go on when you're managing all that. And I really prefer like working with the clients and saying, and this is probably, not a nationwide thing, but like, in Chicago, we have long, narrow houses, and so there's usually bedrooms on the second floor and bedrooms on the third floor. And so we talk about, do you want your children's bedroom? Do you want to take as the owners the entire floor, or do you want your bedroom and a couple of children on your floor? Or do you want like the children all on one floor and you on one floor? And if that's your option, do you want to be above the children or do you want to be below the children? And we'll talk about different
mm,
pros and cons of being above or being below the children's floor. So I enjoy those kind of like, because there's no right answer. It's
sure.
relative to every family how they want to live, and do they want to
Uh-huh.
see toys, or do they want their kids to have a playroom that you don't see because you don't want to see the toys. I've got 4 kids that were born within 5 years. I don't like seeing all the junk. So but some people don't mind that. They're like, I don't care, that that's our life. So I enjoy that. I enjoy being very involved in the finish selections and coordinations. It, kind of lets me pull some of my creativity and stuff like that. So I guess I'm just nervous about or hesitant about getting that big, and my time is pulled away from being able to do that stuff. And if I stay at like 3 projects a year, I'm still able to do that kind of stuff.
I see. Fantastic.
I think also, and listen, I would love to learn this from your viewers. I don't know how in my previous careers, I've always really understood and been able to forecast and to have, backlog and to have, 5-year plans and 10-year plans. I still, after 16 years, don't really know how to do that in our industry, because,
Hmm.
when somebody wants to build a new home, it's pretty much, I need to build a new home. They talk to a realtor, they get a piece of land, and then boom, the process is going. But there aren't a lot of people who are like, well, in 2 years, I'm going to start this process, or in a year, I'm going to start this process. Or there
Uh-huh.
aren't a lot of clients who would say, hey, I want you to build this home. And I would say, okay, but I'm really busy right now. I can start it in a year. Not a lot of people that are going to say, okay, I'll wait for you.
Yeah.
So it's
Huh.
getting that backlog and then being able to build to say, okay, well, now I need to hire 3 more people in order to and I'll be able to keep them busy the next year. So it's
Uh-huh.
not just my time and my income and career that I have to worry about. It's also then all these other people that are working for me. And if I hire them, I want to keep them employed. And, so it's just a lot of responsibility.
Uh-huh. Sure. Interesting. And I mean, most of your projects come from word of mouth, right? I mean, referrals.
Referrals, and mostly referrals from realtors that you
Oh.
know that know me or know my work, and then they have a client, and then they put us together basically. So
Uh-huh.
when I did spec houses, I I worked um, with a real estate agent who had a very good high end network of realtors. And prior to putting the spec house on the market, we would stage it and then have brokers open, and we would combine it with a charitable contribution to a charity of some. They ranged in which charities we use, but for every broker that would come by, we would donate $50, $100, whatever it was, to that charity. And we ended up, typically on average, we would get about 100 brokers that would attend each of these broker opens. And so for my realtor, it was great because it allowed these people to come through and see this house and think about clients they were working with, and would it work for them, would it not work for them. For me, it was great because I had all these realtors who were starting to see my work and the level of detail we went to, the quality of the work, all the thought that went into it. And they would see that, usually one of those a year from Middle Fork, sometimes 2. So that kind of created the brand, or reinforced the brand, so that realtors would be like, oh, you should work with Middle Fork.
Huh. I see.
So
I noticed that you guys do some really exquisite photography, which is great because the work that you guys do is exceptional. Um, I mean, you have a professional photographer go out and or videographer go out and document you guys' work after it's complete. Is that how that happens?
uh, yes, typically we do. It's harder on like where you're um, like right now we're doing a very large project, but it's all renovations to an existing home. Um, and so it's kind of hard. I haven't figured out how we'll photograph that, or even if we will photograph it, because it's hard to tell the story of, oh, we did that roof deck
Uh-huh.
that you see in the picture, but we didn't do the house, and we didn't build the garage that the roof deck is
Uh-huh.
on. So it's but when we do a brand new, a complete build, we'll stage it, and then we'll bring in a professional photographer to shoot it.
I see.
And typically the interior designer or the architect one is there during that shoot, helping, because that's really, it's not just photographing it, but it's having that eye that looks through the camera to get the shot that's gonna, kind of be the, for lack of a better phrase, the money shot, of looking up that staircase or looking down that staircase, or the way you look through the kitchen. It's not just photographing the kitchen, but it's like the specific angle that you get of the kitchen.
That's interesting. And do you direct that kind of photography? I mean, do you look? I mean, you're intimate with the project, and you have an eye for that of that angle, for instance, in the kitchen. I mean, do you direct your photography and videographers? Listen, I want you to come over and get it just like this. I mean,
I have.
yeah.
I will say though that if my architect or interior designer has a passion for it, I will let them do it, because you're only probably going to get about 8 to 10 photographs a day in like a 8-hour day, and to me it's kind of like watching paint dry. So I don't mind if I'm not there, as long as I know there's a creative person there who really wants to be there and look at through the camera at every shot, and so they don't mind the 1 hour it takes to set it up and adjust the lights, and that's not something. I get very impatient with that kind of stuff, but I will do it if there's no one else around.
Got it. Okay. Then I noticed you.
I got
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to say, I also want to mention that the website, if you're going to my website, that is an old website from like 2016. I had a beautiful new website, and GoDaddy somehow lost it. So we're in the process of rebuilding the Middle Fork website. So there are projects on the website that you're looking at that talk about when it'll be completed, and it's been completed and sold. So there's a lot of photography. You'll find more of our photography current either on our house page or on the Facebook page, but don't judge me by my middleforkluxury.com website, because I know that's horrible. So
Okay. When do you have a release date on the new site? When's that going to be up? Do you know?
I don't have that yet.
Okay.
I'm hoping first quarter of 25, but I don't have that confirmed.
Sure. I noticed you guys have got a lot of followers on Facebook, over 2,000 followers on your Middle Fork Luxury Facebook page. How did you guys build so much kind of followership there? It's just from organic, or did you guys do was there some time of a lot of extra growth there on the Facebook page?
No, it's all organic. I never hired any companies on Facebook or Instagram to get followers. And that's interesting. That see, I wouldn't think 2,000 followers is that much. So, but I appreciate you saying or inferring that it is. But no, it's just all organic of clients or clients who have told people, or somebody sees something on Instagram and then they go and they follow it. We get a lot of comments like that on House. And then I think people from House go and, find you on Instagram, or, and we'll get pictures that people are commenting, or we'll get feedback from House that this is a photo that's been viewed more than any other photo this week or whatever. So I think it's just happens like that.
Okay. Well, to me, it says all the right things, right? And I mean, 2,000 followers on your business Facebook page actually is a lot. I mean, we see a lot of pages that have got 4 followers or 8 or 10, and it just tells me that when you've grown a Facebook page like that organically, it just tells me that there's a lot of folks that are really interested in what you guys are doing. And that's where they found you. It sounds like House and some of the other places they found you. You guys are really active on Facebook, and the Facebook page there has got updated photos as of the last few days or today. So I think staying active on that is also very helpful for building that. But it's cool because I think a lot of people are going over, and it sounds like that's a place that people kind of engage with you guys and see more about your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, I've just been in and I don't know that anything will ever come from this, but I've been in contact with a gentleman from Dubai who is in love with one of the projects here in Lincoln Park, and is starting to build some townhouses in Dubai. And I guess from what he's saying, townhouses are not that they don't have a big presence in Dubai. And I don't know what he means by that, if he means houses that are, connected to one another, or if he means the long linear multi-floor. but he's wanting to sort of collaborate on design elements that he viewed, through all of the social media and narrowed it back to Chicago. There was a gentleman years ago in Germany and now has built a house that our team worked with him on based on one of the projects here in Chicago. So it is kind of fun to see people who get that attached to something and want to take it to where they are.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, fantastic. Well, Andy, this is super helpful. Andy Bowyer over at Middle Fork Luxury Development in Chicago. If you're thinking about doing a historic restoration in the Chicago area or building a new home, Andy's a great person to get in touch with. You should take a look at his Facebook page and photos. You can see some just absolutely exquisite work. I mean, I love just high-end woodwork, high-end luxury homes. And I can just really feel the care that you put into it. So, Andy, if folks want to get in touch with you, sounds like the website is going to get an update here in the next few months. Maybe that's not the first place to look. Where are a couple places to get in touch with you if people want to learn more about what you're up to?
So Facebook or Instagram, it's Middle Fork Luxury on both those platforms. We're also on Houzz. You can DM through any of those platforms. My email is abowyer, ABOWYER at middleforkluxury.com. And you can go to the website. I mean, it has emails and phone numbers on there that are valid. I'm just saying, it looks, it's a very dated website. So
Sure.
just keep that in mind. But the information that's on there as far as contact information is accurate.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Andy. Well, thank you for opening up the story a little bit and telling our listeners here about what you guys are up to and how the business works. Interesting that you guys are steeped in the historic aspect of it and totally taking on the regulations and code department and dealing with them and really making, restoring these historic, classic, prestigious neighborhoods in Chicago back to their just like mint condition. It's really neat to see that.
Yeah, well, that was I'm one of the things I mentioned in an interview one time back in like 2010 or 11 was that my goal is not to buy a piece of property and tear the house down. Like at that point, and it means something completely different now. But I was saying that my goal is to build like sustainable architecture, meaning that it can sustain time. It can, live through or survive the test of time. And I said, I'm not unrealistic to think that people won't want to change the kitchen or gut the bathrooms or something in a period of time. But the bones of the building, I can often, deserve to be saved, and you need a little bit of extra work to do that. But there's no reason to tear these phenomenal old buildings like up on the North Shore, these David Adler buildings, and there's some in the city as well, more apartments than homes. But interestingly, and this is next summer, so I guess this is a backlog, but a house that I built almost 10 years ago, we are going to be gutting the kitchen and gutting the primary bathroom and redoing those. But we're not doing anything to the architecture. That's all remaining. They just want different finishes. Then, she had selected stainless steel backsplash, and, they had just gotten married at that point. And now they have 3 kids. And I think, kind of that gray, metal, hard, shiny surface thing, that was her life then. And now it's, more warm and cozy and family friendly, and she wants to change it. And that's great. But, so being able to do a home like we've done on Dearborn Street or in Old Town, the Workman's Cottage, I love being able to save those homes and then enhancing them as they, would have been used at that time. I think it's a very rewarding aspect of my job.
Fantastic. Great, guys. Well, if you want to get in touch with Andy, Middle Fork Luxury on Facebook, and yeah, Andy, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been great. I've learned a lot. I've taken some notes, and really appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.